All right, let's give it a few more minutes and hopefully we'll get some more committee members. Jody Herson, I believe, is away. Right. In terms of our speakers, both Hillary Bosch and Brianne Bowden are here. And Diane Ashley is here. Julio Batista has now joined us. All right, let me see if I can track down a couple of our other committee members. Sorry for this delay. I'll be right back. Okay, unfortunately, I wasn't able to round up anybody. We're going to start the meeting. We have a pretty full agenda. So going to call this meeting to order at, I guess, 6:44. And again, I apologize for the delay. So we have two guest speakers. First, we're going to hear from Hillary Bosch, Outreach Coordinator for the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability for the Department of Sanitation, who will give us an update on the city's composting program. And then we have a presentation on cancer and I think other clinical trials at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center from Brianne Bodine. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's Bowden. And she is the oncology research nurse manager at the clinical protocol and data management office of the Herbert Irving Comprehensive Cancer Center. I hope she has a business card that can fit all of that. And hopefully we have now been joined by OC Canada. We officially have a quorum. Thank you, OC. And we have our some of our regular crew from reporting from New York Presbyterian Hospital. We have Julio Batista from the Isabella Geriatric Center, Diane Ashley. Hopefully we'll be joined by our community liaison from the City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and another representative from the Columbia University Irving Medical Center. So why don't we get going? I'm very appreciative that both of our speakers were able to join us tonight. And I think we may, in fact, have some other people as well who want to speak to us. So Hillary, why don't you begin and tell us everything you can about composting and how the city is going to gear up for a full-fledged composting program sometime soon.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Steve. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, sounds good. With this computer, sometimes it's a toss-up. Great, thanks for having me. I'm Hillary. I'm a compost outreach coordinator at the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability over at DSNY. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with composting services already, so I hope that I can just be here to clear up any gaps, go over some recent updates, and then give you some talking points to outreach yourselves as you are advocates for this kind of work. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. So the first update, as you probably heard from the mayor, there is a rollout plan finally for citywide curbside composting service. It started in Queens in the fall after a brief break over the winter while they were trying to figure out some routing and efficiency issues. It started back up in March and has no plans of stopping seasonally in the future, both in Queens or for any borough. It's going to get to Brooklyn in October, the Bronx and Staten Island in March of 2024, and then Manhattan in October of 2024. It's the same program that we rolled out in the opt-in districts where you had to sign up and build like a coalition for your community board, but this time there is no sign up needed. It's still a voluntary service. It will just be coming by every single residential building on your recycling day. So when it does come to Manhattan, there is no need to look up a special composting day or sign up for service or do any forms apart from filling out a form to get a bin if you'd like a bin. But it'll just be the same day as recycling. Of course, as you are all probably aware, there is a bill in front of the City Council right now to make curbside composting mandatory. That has not yet come through to us, but when it does, we'll be sure to, of course, let everyone know and do a massive outreach campaign. We did just receive approval to proceed with a mandatory yard waste recycling bill, or mandatory yard waste recycling rule, apologies. But right now that's a little bit in limbo as we wait to hear from the City Council. But again, that's also not into effect, and we'll definitely notify everyone if that rule came to effect, much like the new set out rules. Smart bin updates. I think this is the best part of the good news for Manhattan. 250 bins were installed in northern Manhattan, South Bronx, Brooklyn areas that had yet to receive service. And then sort of as like we know it's going to be a while for Manhattan from now until October 2024. We're in the process of currently installing 150 more smart bins in all over Manhattan to fill those gaps in the map of food scrap drop-offs. As you probably know, the bins are open 24/7. You've probably seen them in your neighborhood in M12, but they do require the NYC Compost app just as a small barrier to make sure we have a cleaner stream of waste there. Why should you compost? These are just some talking points for your own work. The biggest selling points that we've found to work for New Yorkers, for superintendents, for management boards, or co-op boards, which are typically people in apartment buildings' biggest barriers to participating are the local benefits. Of course, there are global benefits in reducing methane, reducing waste to landfills, cutting our greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to climate change. But the local benefits are really the big selling points that work in terms of our outreach, which are containerizing that waste and getting it out of bags where rats can rip it open, leave litter on the street, create a health risk, and just contribute to the growing rat problem. So we're really pushing this as part of our larger, of course, discussion around containerization to containerize food waste. What can you compost? This has been a little different depending on where you composted in the past. Some people who went to smaller community gardens or used Grow NYC or the Lower East Side Ecology Center's drop-off spots, sometimes they didn't accept meat, bones, or dairy. That's because they operated at smaller facilities, but we operate at an industrial scale. I think a couple MSWAB folks went on the Staten Island tour a couple weeks back, which is really cool. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if the Manhattan waste would go to Staten Island or if it would go to the Queens anaerobic digester, but either way, we can accept these heavier items like meat, bones, dairy, shells, whatever. We just don't want pet waste or any kind of human waste or any kind of really unsanitary products or objects. How to participate, it's the same as it would be for recycling. Separate it in your kitchen, put it in the correct bin, and then either you or whoever manages waste at your building would set it out the night before collection. And then again, for food waste, I'll jump in this in a moment. We do require it to be in a container. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Yard waste doesn't need to be in your brown bin because it's less of a appealing meal for the critters. But for food waste and food soil paper, it either has to be in a DSNY brown bin, or another update with this version of the program, it can be in any bin with a lid, so long as it's got one of those decals, which you can order for free for delivery. And then it's no longer than 55 gallons because we love our sand workers and we don't want them to break anything. So this is great in case, something, God forbid, happens to your brown bin, but it does happen. You can keep participating so long as you use any kind of bin with a lid, like a normal recycling bin, and then put a decal on it. And then, of course, for yard waste, you can put that in your bin, or you can put it in a paper, lawn, and leaf bag, bundle the sticks, or in a clear recycling bag. Where does it go? Okay, let's see. Oh, it does go to Newtown Creek. This is the map of where all of the material would head once we pick it up from your curb. So as you see, the Staten Island facility that we manage, it's primarily waste from Staten Island, as well as school waste. This is a residential map. So Staten Island waste and school waste goes here. Most of the material would go to Newtown Creek as its final destination, which sounds ominous, but it's a good thing. And then I should clarify, Newtown Creek is a wastewater treatment plant where we anaerobically digest the material, purify it, basically goes into a mechanical stomach, and we turn it into a biogas that we can then supplement to liquefied or to natural gas in the grid. The essentials for property owners and building management, once they start service, like if they started service in Manhattan, is letting residents know where the bin is and how they can participate. I can't tell you how many times a building got a bin and then just never told the residents where it was because it's in a random spot outside, or it's in a, random tucked away corner to reduce any kind of negative side effects, but it's just really tucked away. So that's the essential. And then if you want someone to come talk to your building, again, it won't be for a while until 2024. Obviously, we're happy to come and do a site visit. Some misconceptions that we've heard that maybe you can also help address as you're talking to people at composting. Number one, the biggest thing we hear is that it attracts critters, and it doesn't. If you close the bin, if you use a thin plastic liner and then shut the bin after use, it should not attract or cause or prompt any kind of pest activity more so than a trash can. It should in fact mitigate that more than a trash bag or an open trash can. The next thing that we hear from supers is that's just like, it's too much work. And I hear that, but it's the same stuff they would be normally taking out. It's just in a little special bin. It's not on here, but one of the other misconceptions that we get is that, since recycling is mandated, supers or building management, it's their job to sort out, things that don't belong at the risk of receiving a fine if they don't. Because this program is voluntary, they do not have to sort it. So if they're putting out that compost bin and they see, I don't know, a piece of foil in there or like a chip bag, it's not their job to fish it out. It's okay, we can sort it out. Again, if this becomes mandatory, I'm not sure what rules they might include there, but right now they do not have to sort out anything. The last thing that we've heard from Queens residents, because they've have the service, is that compost gets thrown out. And it might look like that, but it's a two-sided truck, and we would not go through all this effort if we were just going to put it in the trash. And the reason we're rolling out with this program as opposed to the opt-in program is that it significantly lowered the barriers to participation. We tried the opt-in program as an effort to be more efficient in our routing, because we don't want to be burning diesel fuel running empty trucks around a neighborhood where no one wants to compost. So we were like, oh, maybe if we have people sign up, we can optimize the routes. And while it did optimize the routes, it isolated a lot of people who couldn't get enough support in their neighborhood, or whose building management didn't want to do it. So with this version, we took out that sign up aspect of it, and we optimize the routes on our end. For example, using those dual-sided trucks so that only one truck is needed for trash and compost rather than a truck for trash and a truck for compost. Also stretching the routes out. So that was the effort that we did on our end rather than making it residents' jobs to make it easier for us. So until service starts, keep using those drop-offs, keep using the smart bins, download that app. I'm sure many of you also have taken or at least have heard of the Master Composter course. It's amazing. I'm currently working my way through it now as well. And that's a really great resource to learn more about compost science and building your own bin if you are interested in building up your own composting initiative from now until curbside starts. And then the last thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the new set out rules. We're really trying to incentivize people to use a container as opposed to a bag, again, to reduce litter and reduce rat activity. So it used to be 4 p.m., but now you can set out at 6 p.m. if you're using a container. But, for whatever reason, the timing or the bin doesn't work out, you can always set it out in a bag still after 8 p.m. We just ask that it be set out by midnight because we're in the process of moving our shifts up. So we just want to make sure we don't miss it. This is already into effect. The waiting period or the warning period is over. So this needs to start now, or you might get a summons. So just remind your building if they're not doing this already. And then that's it. That was a very fast overview because I didn't know, what was most interesting, but I'm happy to take questions now to go over anything that you weren't as sure about.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, but before I get to my committee members, and actually there is I have a couple of questions myself, and there is one question in the chat from, maybe there's more than one. Hold on a moment. Yeah, there's a question from Arnold Gore. Arnold, I haven't heard from you in a long time. This is great. So Arnold says, I received an email from a community garden saying that only 1/3 of the composting in bins is actually composted instead of being incinerated. Is this true?
Hey, Arnold. We're not incinerating any waste, anything in the waste stream in New York City. There might be a misconception there that rather than the process of composting, aerobic composting, it's being anaerobically digested. And then prior to it being connected to the grid, anything left over that wasn't put back into heating the facility or energizing the facility itself was being flared. But when something is incinerated, it creates CO2 and methane, whereas when we're flaring biogas, it only creates CO2, which is unfortunately in terms of greenhouse gases better than methane. So it wasn't ideal, but nothing is being incinerated, and now the grid is fully ready to go. So I don't see that happening much more in the future.
Okay, and well, let me continue with the chat. From Aileen Reynolds, during the Staten Island compost facility tour, we were told that food scraps dropped off at drop-off sites, such as the one in Matthews Palmer Playground in Hell's Kitchen, is transported to the Staten Island facility, not Newtown Creek, because it's initially collected from that park by the Lower East Side Ecology Center. Wondering if that's correct, given the map you showed earlier.
Hi, Eileen. Sure, I'm sorry, I should have clarified. That map was just for residential routes. So for the food scrap drop-off sites, they might go to a variety of places. LESEC might, drop off at Newtown Creek, but many of them do drop off at Fresh Kills.
All right, but they all end up being going through an anaerobic digester and being turned into biogas, no matter where they go?
Newtown Creek, yes. But at the Fresh Kills facility, at the Staten Island compost facility,
Yes.
It is actually, aerobically composted, put into windrows, and you get that soil amendment product that comes out.
Oh, so some people might actually prefer that.
Yeah, so if that's something you prefer, if you really want to be mindful where your scraps go, if you participate in curbside composting, odds are it'll be digested. But if you want to make sure it turns into compost, check with a food scrap drop-off site,
Okay.
not a smart bin site near you.
All right, that's interesting. Okay, all right, Aileen has a follow-up question. I've heard that anaerobic composting isn't as good as aerobic composting, because anaerobic composting process a mixture of both food scraps and other things like human waste, for example. Is that true?
So the anaerobic process I'm describing, it's not composting at all. There's aerobic composting, which is the windrows that you saw in Staten Island, where you get that soily textured product. And then there's anaerobic digestion, which does combine with the technical term is bioslurry. I have learned from my visit there, which is whatever goes down the drains. And it is mixed with all kinds of waste products, and that together is digested, and then the gas is collected and purified and added to the grid or used or flared. So it's hard to compare what's better, because it's two different products. One is for parks and gardens, and then one is for energy.
All right, very good. Julio Batista has a question, which I think he has submitted as just a member of the public. Are bins going to be supplied to some property owners, especially HDFCs? Those are the low moderate income co-ops, the housing development fund companies that are, well, that's what he says, that are moderate to low income co-ops. So are the bins going to be supplied to some buildings?
Hey, Julio. Yes. At what we did in Queens, which will be the plan going forward, is that any building of 10 or more apartment units will automatically get a brown bin. It will just be delivered once we announce service, so you will get it. If it's a smaller building or 1 to 9 units, the feedback that we got was that people didn't want to just get a surprise bin that they didn't have space for, and then they'd have to manage. So for that, there will be a form online where you can say, I want a bin, please bring one to me, and then we will bring one to them.
So even though you don't have to sign up for the program, how do you know how do you know in that case which buildings to bring the bins to?
Sure, we work with other city agencies, the number one being Housing Preservation and Development, and they have a map of building sizes around the city. So we're able to get a list, a delivery list of every building of 10 or more units, and we just add them to our delivery list. And then for folks in the 1 to 9 unit buildings who want to sign up, everyone will get something in the mail saying, if you want a bin, sign up here.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you do, you're not just dropping them off willy-nilly. People have to request the bins.
Right.
All right. So Julio is going to get something in the mail, or the leader of his co-op will get something, and they'll have to request the bin. Okay.
Sorry, one last thing I want to say, Julio. If service starts in Manhattan in October of 2024, please keep an eye out for that mailer to request a bin. If you're in a 1 to 9 unit building in August, September.
No, he's in a much bigger building.
Oh, it's bigger? Okay, never mind. So you'll just get one. You're good.
We're just asking because, Steve, I'm part of the HDFC coalition, which has a great number of buildings. So I'm talking reference of a couple of hundred buildings. All right.
Cool.
Well, maybe I should put the two of you in touch with each other, because maybe this is information that would be useful to Hillary.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, very good. We've now been joined by another committee member, Jay Mazer. Thank you, Jay. So talk a little more. Are we now going to have like almost a completely new fleet of collection trucks that are going to be two-sided, so that you can collect compost along with regular recycling? Is that how it's going to work?
So thankfully, we do already have a lot of dual bin trucks. Those are the ones that we use for normal recycling routes, because we put metal, glass, and plastic in one side, and then we put paper in the other.
I thought it's in my neighborhood, it looks as though it's two separate trucks that come around.
It might be. There's not a dual bin truck for every neighborhood. They're a little swankier.
Yeah.
So one part of expanding this service was requesting a budget for more of those kinds of trucks.
Yeah, so you'll have to expand those, yeah. And is there a composting program for offices?
That's a great question. For
I have a lot of people in my office who will leave behind a lot of pizza. They don't finish the pizza. So can I tell them to compost it someplace?
Absolutely. For just normal people, like in our office, for example, we collect it in the freezer and then one of us carries it over to a drop-off site.
Yeah.
But for businesses,
Yeah.
obviously DSNY doesn't service businesses. So
Right.
If you're in like a big old shared apartment or a office building, you could talk to the building management and be like, hey, I know you have trash carting. I know you have recycling carting. Would you do compost carting also?
Does that exist in the private sector?
Yep. Yeah, there are plenty of businesses that are required to get organics carting. So there's plenty of carters out there who are willing to do that.
Oh, is that right? Okay. All right, let me turn to OC Kamina. She has a member of my committee has a question.
Yeah, hi. So the majority of buildings in our district are more than nine units building. So, and my question is, are you guys going to first do like an education to either management companies or supers about what is coming? Because some builders will get those containers and it's like, what am I doing with that? My second question about buildings that have already compost system in their buildings, such as my co-op. We compost here for at least 20, I want to say 25 years. So, and we use the compost in the garden. So how does it, how are we going to go about that? Because we already have our own composting system. So walk me through if we're getting containers or not, and if so, like, how's it going to work?
Sure. So for your first question, just before I forget, yes, there will be a huge educational component as part of this. Not only will they get, flyers in the mail about a month before, but when we deliver a bin, inside the bin comes with a guide on how to use it, and also a guide specifically for building management to say, this is what this is where you should put it, this is what it's used for. But
in Spanish, by any chance? But dual language, because that's really important.
Sure. So the ones that just come in the bin are in English, but the back of the sheet has a list of all the links in 12 different languages. So if that doesn't work out, they can always go to the website in their preferred language.
We are asking supers and porters to go online to search for a manual in Spanish or any other language other than English. And I don't think it's going to work well in our district. So my point is that if we want that to be successful in our district, and we do need it, definitely, I think we should do more education for our district, should be more involved than just sending manual flyers or whatever that comes with the brown bin.
Sure, I completely agree. So in Queens, we canvassed every single house, and we hired a staff of people that could speak the most popular languages in Queens, and we had them canvass the neighborhoods that corresponded to their language. That'll probably be the plan for Manhattan. On our outreach team, we have, I think, 4 or 5 Spanish speakers, so they'd probably be the ones deployed to that neighborhood.
Okay, we have other languages. There are some Albanians, Russians. I mean, like, there are other staff like that speaks, mainly languages other than English. And so it's absolutely, it's important because we want that program to be successful in our district. And that's why the outreach here should be a lot different than outreach in downtown.
It would be. Like I said, we make sure all of our materials are translated, and when we go out into the field, we bring all of those languages. Also, something that we tried to focus on in Queens was to have at least, a dozen events in every district before service started. Granted, I'm not sure what supers and building staff are going to, street fairs, but we're trying to be in as many places as possible, handing out flyers on street corners with 12 different languages. So I hear you, and I completely agree that like a more nuanced approach is necessary if we're going to get people on board who, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to get all the information they need. So if there's any like spots that you think would be a good spot, or like the languages, like you said, that you think would be good, if you could send them to me. I know it's like a year and a half away, but just to make sure we have the right languages. Like, for example, I'm not sure if we do have any materials translated into Albanian right now. So that's good to know for the future.
Wow.
What about my other question about buildings like mine? And I'm sure my co-op where I live is not unique in that. Buildings that already have composting system working, they have composting in place.
Okay, so you're composting on site?
And we use it on site.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's fine. Please keep doing that. No one is required to participate in this. The only requirement, were it to become mandatory, was that there couldn't be food scraps in the trash. You're more than welcome not to give us any food scraps at all. That's totally fine.
But OC, is your building composting all the different items that Hillary showed on her slide?
No, we're not composting animal byproducts.
Yeah.
We only composting the vegetables, fruit vegetables, and eggshells, things like that. Right. So at what point it's going to be illegal to toss any food scrap in the trash? Is
I'm
there
not
a
sure.
date for that
There's no law or rule on the books right now.
yet?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's coming.
Well, we don't know. It's a,
No, it's great that it's coming. I
Well,
just wonder where.
well, there's apparently a bill pending in the city council, but which Hillary alluded to. But at this point, it's a voluntary program. We'll have to reconvene at some point next year when we get closer to the kickoff date and talk, I guess, in more detail as to how we can assist in the educational outreach campaign.
Probably before next year, but
Well, this doesn't kick off in Manhattan until October of 2024.
right, but education to the staff will take some time, Steve.
Yes, but if you would try to tell them about it too much in advance, it may not be useful. Tanya.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. I guess in keeping with the topic of education, I was wondering about just in general, in terms of educating, residents, because I know a lot of people don't even understand what composting is and why, and why they should even do it. Even in my building, of course, recycling is mandatory, but people don't even understand that. So they're like, what do I even put in there? Do I put this? Even at my job, it's like we have a recycling bin and a regular trash. People are like, I don't know which one goes. And this is an office. I don't know what goes in what. So how, because in order for this to be successful, residents themselves are going to have, some of it's going to depend on them and doing this. And so, question is like, how do we address, that? And then the second question I had is, you may have spoke about this, and please forgive me if you haven't, in terms of on the street, having these bins on the street and educate, because people order things, they're eating outside or they're doing whatever. Will there be place for people to put their food scraps or whatever, if they're doing activities outside, or if they're outside, instead of and this is a sarcastic comment, instead of throwing the chicken bones on the ground or whatever people do, feeding it to the rats, or the squirrels. So those two questions.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, no, totally. The first one, yeah, you're absolutely right. People can't recycle. They can't do anything. Our diversion rate's like 17%. I think we're required to have it at 30 by now, which is bananas. But no, yeah, it's a huge, huge.
1 second, the bananas you can compost, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay, not recycling for that.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. But yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a pain. But we have a team. We're trying to be everywhere at once, or everywhere we can be. We're trying to be at every event. If you have a community event that's coming up, or your building is having like a co-op board presentation, or I've been to weekly church meetings, I've been to gardens, I've been to co-op boards, I've everywhere that we can set up a table, give presentation, flag someone down on the street, outside grocery stores. We've camped out outside subway stops, basically anywhere people are willing to let us camp out and hand out flyers. Parks, outside of parks also. That's a big one. We also have a program I don't work on, so I don't know quite as much about it, called the Clean Buildings Program. It was formerly the Zero Waste Building Maintenance Training thing. That just gives a quick rundown of anyone who manages trash at a location, where it's like, this is where you put everything. But I think the biggest thing that's shooting us in the foot here is that recycling is different in every single municipality. Like, the things you can recycle in New York City are different than the things you can recycle on Long Island or in New Jersey or in Yonkers, which is just a pain. But thankfully, New York City recycles more than most places. Like, other places can't take, plastic straws or plastic cutlery or certain resin types of plastic. So one thing I can say about New York, which I'm trying to get the message out as we talk about composting, is that look at the pictures, and we say for plastic, if it keeps its shape, it can be recycled. But yeah, everywhere we go, we're bringing those recycling flyers, and yeah, we're really trying to work on it. The second thing that you mentioned for, if someone's eating on the street and they have something, a pizza crust, whatever, that would be the smart bin program, where those orange bins on the street, where all you need to unlock it is an app. Again, I realize that is a barrier, that you do need an app, but you don't need data. It's just a Bluetooth connection. So you just turn on your Bluetooth, you go up to it and you say, hi, I'm at this bin. It unlocks, you put it in. And the reason they lock is keep the critters out, and to not contaminate it. Just because there's too high a contamination rate, it can get a little messy. But there's already, I don't know exactly how many are in Upper Manhattan, but there's 250 in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx and parts of Brooklyn, with another 150 that are going to be only in Manhattan. So it'll probably average out to a little over 200 in Manhattan.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of them. I mean, maybe because I just wasn't looking. So I'm not making this a judgment. I'm just saying I haven't seen any of them. So, perhaps, and I'm in a very high traffic area with a lot of, restaurants and things like that. So, I'll look a little harder. The last thing I want to say, Steve, that I'm done, is just that, in terms of potential places to do this outreach, you probably already do this, grocery stores. I remember, and I could just allude to, this is 125th Street. I know it's not our community, but the Whole Foods at 125th Street, when they first opened, used to do like days where they would have people come in and do education, food demonstrations, things like that in their space. And so, perhaps, people, because people are going in grocery stores and they're going to be preparing food. And so that could be a good place to sort of reach people in the community, about composting and what it is and why it's, a good thing for the earth.
Totally. Yeah, we're trying to meet people where they're at, not make them come to a new spot or take them out of their way. In Queens, I was at a lot of subway stops and a lot of bodegas, so that's probably where we'll be.
All right, very good.
I'm looking at Cheryl's message. Sorry, you're at 165th and Broadway. It looks like the closest one to you, there's at 160th and Amsterdam. And then there's one at 165th in Amsterdam.
The bins?
Yeah, the smart bins.
At both 160th and 165th and Amsterdam?
Yep, 160th in Amsterdam and then 165th in Amsterdam.
Okay.
Do you know how many of them are coming in our district out of the 100 and I don't know, however, that you said are going to add on to the existing smart bins? Do you know how many of them are coming to our district? Oh, could you find out and let us know?
I have no idea. I've been asking, I'm like, where are these going? And I think they're really still trying to iron it out because there's a lot of demand. But looking at your district, it looks like there's a good number on Amsterdam. And you'll see the new ones pop up on the map. Here's what the map looks like at that NYC compost app. Sorry, it's a little bright, but
I would have suggested putting them along Broadway, and I had recommended, in fact, that
I agree.
I had recommended that one go near the subway station at 157th and Broadway, because people at one point were accustomed to bringing their compost there as a drop-off site. I don't know, was it Grow NYC? Somebody had a program a few years back in which they had established a half dozen or so drop-off points, and they had tables one day a week where you could bring your compost, and that was one of the locations, and I think it was fairly successful. So I would have recommended that we at least put one of the smart bins back at that location. Is it Mara Lady Pimentel from WEAC? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, correct.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Were you present when Hillary made her presentation at a WEAC meeting about a month ago?
Yes, I was there. Thank you, Hillary, for this wonderful presentation. Nice to see you again.
Yes, you too.
I want, as you say, I am Marilady Pimentel. I am now the bilingual community organizer at WEAC. and I in your service. And I was assigned to CB12 and this in your district. And I want to say to OC and Tanya that we have in mind to educate the community in Spanish. So later in the year, I don't know yet when it's going to happen, but we have in our agenda to bring to the community what is compost and how you can use the compost bins. So please, we are here to help our community in Spanish. I don't know in another language, but in Spanish, I'm going to be helping with that. So thank you, that's it.
All right, well, that's good news. That's excellent. Thank you. And to the extent that we can assist you, please let us know. We certainly want to encourage your efforts. Jacob, do you have a question or comment? No, okay. All right, very good. All right, so Hillary, I think we would appreciate it if you would come back, maybe early next year, if not sooner, so that we can work.
Sooner.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
sooner. Okay,
Yeah, whatever.
sooner for OC, but so that we can work together to plot out how we're going to spread the word in Washington Heights and Inwood. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I have one before you go. I have a question that's off topic. I'm having difficulty now finding a place to recycle plastic bags. So I assume they don't go together with the compost. When before the plastic bags were banned, any store that basically gave them out, any chain store, whatever, had to agree to take them back. But now that the bags are banned, nobody seems to be taking them back anymore. Do you have any idea whether anybody is recycling plastic bags at this point? I tell you what, I'll leave you with that question, and you can get back to me. But please forward the PowerPoint to me so I can refer to it and pass it on to my committee members. Thank you very much, Hillary. And I've given you a little bit of homework, and I expect you to get back to me at some point soon. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay, very good. All right, we're going to move on now to speaker number 2. I think it's, I'm going to guess now that it's Brianne Bowden.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. And she has a slew of titles or credentials, and maybe you can tell us what they all stand for.
I'm the manager of nursing and outreach for clinical trials at the Cancer Center at Columbia.
Okay,
That's the short version of that. And I have Jessica with us today also. Jessica is one of our nurse navigators.
Okay.
So she is actually going to take the lead in talking to everyone today. But we just have some information that we wanted to share about clinical trials, just what clinical trials are, kind of the value of them, maybe clear up some misconceptions, and also share some information about the outreach work that we do. So I'm just going to.
Okay, well, let me just, I think as I previously wrote to, if not to you, then maybe to Suzanne Murphy.
Yes, she's one of our outreach coordinators.
And she may even be, I thought I might have seen her name, but I thought she's on this call. But in any case, this committee has been interested in clinical trials for a number of years, and primarily in making sure that that there is true informed consent, that when the clinical trials are reviewed by the institutional review boards, that there is a community representative and there's community input provided in the review of those proposed trials, and that the information flows back, that the people who are enrolled in the trials have an opportunity to find out the results ultimately of what they participated in, and that the community at large, including the community board, that we get some kind of occasional reports on the work that's being done at the medical center and the results of the many clinical trials that are taking place there. So we would have a better appreciation of what kind of trials are being undertaken. So, well, having said that, so I now turn it over to Jessica Hutchinson, who is, did you say a nursing navigator?
Yes, I'll let Jessica introduce herself, but she's one of our clinical trials nurse navigators. So her role is she helps to match patients with clinical trials, and she's also part of our outreach team, doing exactly what we're doing tonight, just getting out, speaking to the community, just to keep everyone informed. So.
Okay, and she'll be able to explain how people find out about the trials.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, Jessica, the floor is yours. Now, wait, I can't hear you. No. No, I can't hear you.
I can get started, and maybe just if you want to try calling him by phone.
Or sign off and log in again.
Yeah, that sometimes helps.
All right, I'll give Jessica just a minute, see if she can get this straightened out.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
But-
Sorry.
And apparently you also managed to change your name in the process.
Yes, I'll change that back in just a moment.
Okay, but we know your true identity, so it's really not going to work.
Okay. Did you start, Brianne?
No.
Okay.
We've been waiting for you.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start off with what is a clinical trial. So clinical trials are research studies that involve people. So when conducting a clinical trial, it's the way that scientists, doctors find new treatments for all different kinds of diseases and health problems. So as I mentioned earlier, I work in the cancer center, but clinical trials are for all different kinds of health problems. So with every clinical trial, it's going to follow a protocol. So that will contain information about the goal of the trial, which also has rules for who can participate in the trial, which is called eligibility criteria. So with my position a little bit, I have to check the eligibility criteria when people reach out to me. So with the eligibility criteria, it's different for each trial. It depends on the type of trial, the treatment, the intervention being studied. So some examples of eligibility criteria will be age, gender, type of disease, the stage of the disease, previous treatments a person has had, and other medical conditions that they may have. So With that, there are many types of trials. So the types of clinical trials that we will see are treatment trials, which will test new treatments or combinations of treatments or a new type of surgery or therapy. We have prevention trials, which are more appropriately risk reduction trials. They look for new ways to reduce the risk of a disease occurring or returning in a person. And then we have screening trials, which are new ways to detect a disease or health conditions. And then there's supportive care trials, which focuses on ways to improve the quality of life with people with certain health conditions. So that brings me to why are clinical trials being done? So clinical trials are being done to find new ways to detect a health condition earlier or to prevent it altogether, to find out if a new treatment is safe and works well, to find out if different ways of using existing treatments to see if they will work better, are easier to use, or have less side effects on the patients. And then also to learn how to use treatment in a group of people in which treatment hasn't been used before. So with that, ethical guidelines, you kind of already mentioned that a little bit before, Steve. So ethical guidelines, we try to follow them when conducting clinical trials to prioritize people who can participate being kept safe and treated fairly. So there are federal regulations in place to make sure clinical trials are being carried out safely and ethically. So some of the ways that people who participate in clinical trials are protected through the informed consent process. So this is the process of learning important information about a clinical trial before a person decides whether or not they want to participate. The research team explains that the trial to the patient, they review a document called the informed consent form with the potential participant. They discuss details about the trial, such as why it's being done, how long it's expected to last, any tests or procedures that will need to be done as a part of the research, and other potential benefits and risks. In order to enroll in a clinical trial, the participant needs to sign the informed consent. Taking part in a clinical trial is completely voluntary, and participants can change their mind at any time. Another way that participants are protected is with the Institutional Review Board, also known as the IRB. So this is the independent committee made up of doctors, statisticians, and community members like you, which clinical trials are approved by and then monitored by the IRB to make sure that participants are protected and to make sure that the risks are minimal when compared to the potential benefits. There's also close monitoring by our research teams, which includes our doctors and nurses. They monitor for any changes in health status, possible side effects, and also provide education about the study to those who participate. So a word everyone might have heard before is the word placebo. So a placebo can be a pill, it can be a liquid, it can be powder that looks like the treatment being tested, but has no treatment value. It's often called a sugar pill. In clinical trials, experimental treatments are sometimes compared with placebos to help researchers understand how effective the experimental treatment is. So it's important now that clinical trials for serious or life-threatening conditions, they do not include placebos. Before deciding to become involved in a clinical trial, we always have to make sure that there is a chance that a patient may receive a placebo. So this is something that would be discussed during the informed consent process.
I'm sorry, Jessica, could we just go back for a moment?
Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know that I ever appreciated this particular point. It's that clinical trials for serious or life-threatening health conditions do not include placebos. So, does the person who's not taking perhaps the new drug, is that person taking an existing drug that still has some beneficial impact? Is that the concept? But may not be as effective as the newly developed drug?
So
So-
some studies I'm sorry, Jess, I didn't mean to jump
That's
in.
fine, you're fine.
Some studies, there is, especially in the earlier phase studies, there's only the new novel treatment. So everyone knows what they're getting. Then in some later stage studies, we're comparing this new novel treatment with what we call with or without what's called standard of care treatment. So it's this new treatment or the standard treatment that someone would have received anyway if they
Right.
were not participating in a clinical trial.
Right.
And so it's not that one, because the whole reason it's in trials is we don't know yet if it's
Right.
better
Right.
than the standard. So it's, you can receive one or the other, or sometimes in some studies it's even both. Sometimes someone can be randomized to the standard of care treatment or the standard of care treatment plus this new treatment as well.
Okay, all right. So there would be some studies,
Mhm.
everybody is getting the drug that's being tested,
Correct.
and others in which you're at least getting the current standard.
Yes, the people with serious health conditions,
Right.
with cancer, anything like that,
Right.
treatment is never withheld. People are always
Right.
at least
Right.
getting what would be the standard treatment.
Okay, well, I think that's a pretty important point. Okay, very good. I'm sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So we'll go to the next slide. So why do people choose to participate in a clinical trial? So there's many different reasons. It could be different reasons for everyone. Some of the most common reasons people choose to participate in a clinical trial are because the standard treatments for their health condition haven't worked, they've stopped working, or they cause significant side effects. So clinical trials can provide another option when the improved treatments have failed, such as the standard of care. Other people participate in clinical trials because they want to help improve medical knowledge, which can help those with similar health issues. So different people can experience the same disease very differently, and everyone can respond to the same treatment in different ways based on their biology, their environment, their behavior, and their life experiences. So our life experiences based on who we are, where we live, our race, ethnicity, and the money and resources available to us. This is why it's important to have people of different ages, races, ethnicities, and genders to be involved in clinical trials. Treatment should be tested in the people they are meant to help. So this often means with certain health conditions from all walks of life. Making sure that people from all types of backgrounds have access to clinical trials is one way that we can help improve health equity. We are actually having an event at Columbia this spring on May 18th, specifically to discuss and celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion in clinical trials. This event is open to the public and to our community, so if anyone's interested, I highly encourage you to attend, and we'll have some guest speakers followed by some food and networking, and we will attach the Eventbrite link so you guys can have access to that and share it with other community members. So as Brianne was saying a little earlier, we do have a dedicated community outreach team and navigating the clinical trial system, which includes myself. We started with one clinical trials nurse navigator in 2019, and now the team has expanded to include a second nurse navigator, an outreach coordinator, and a diversity, equity, and inclusions research manager. So our goal is to educate and share information with our community about clinical trials, improve access to clinical trials, and also earn your trust and respect, and to become a partner in your health and wellness if you need us. So this is the email address that I actually connects with me, who's the clinical, so it connects with the clinical trials nurse navigator. So we can always answer questions about clinical trials. We can assist anyone with finding a clinical trial. If anyone's friend or family member is interested, that's also the phone number that directs straight to the clinical trials navigator line. And then the two websites below, the first one is just our cancer with clinical trials, and then our Recruit Me. It allows you to search by disease type, and there's an option for healthy volunteers as well. We highly value your input from the community. So if you guys have any questions, ideas, feedbacks, thoughts about clinical trials, or anything else we've talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will also attach the email address in the chat so you guys have a link to it. And if you guys have any questions or comments, you guys can share them now.
Well, my first question, Jessica, is are you able to connect people to clinical trials across the board, or just those involved with cancer?
So I primarily focus with cancer, but if say with the Recruit Me site, if a healthy volunteer does email me about something, I am able to try to at least find them the right contact information, and I will like give them the information.
So are there nurse navigators elsewhere within the medical center that are dealing with other types of clinical trials beyond cancer? Or is there some other are there other people doing this kind of work, or is your position somewhat unique to the Herbert Irving Comprehensive Cancer Center?
The nurse
Brianna,
navigator role, the nurse navigator role is the clinical trials nurse navigator role is unique to our department.
Okay,
There are other departments that do research as well.
right.
I don't believe any of them have nurse navigators. They
Right.
do have other people that work on the research though. So there are nurses, there are clinical research coordinators, there
Right.
are other people that would be able to assist. But the clinical trial nurse navigator role is something that's unique to our department in the Cancer Center.
And so if somebody wanted to find out about a clinical trial, can they go to the Columbia website? Is there some kind of listing where you can find out about clinical trials?
Yeah, so the big website is clinicaltrials.gov. That shows clinical trials, not just at Columbia, but across the country. And those are for all types of health conditions. We also have, so our Recruit Me website is what's Columbia specific. And so if you go on Recruit Me, and I'll put the direct link to that in the chat.
Right.
I just did.
Oh, thanks. You can filter that by health condition as well. So whether it's cancer, diabetes, during the peak of the pandemic, there were, COVID-19 treatment trials. So you can look through different studies that way as well.
All right, thank you. Tanya.
Yes, I just, wanted to, first of all, thank you for this presentation in terms of clinical trials. I think it's, very important in terms of, especially in diversity. I wanted to just find out if you all had data in terms of minority participation in clinical trials. How has it changed over the years? Do you have data in terms of where it is now? Is it at a better point? Do we still have a lot of need? Curious in terms of where things are.
Yeah, so the most recent data that I have is from a few years ago. I have to check the exact year. I believe it's 2018. But at that point in time, there were a lot of groups that were still very underrepresented. People of color make up between 12 and 15% of individuals with a cancer diagnosis and are only 3 to 5% of clinical trial participants. It's a little different where we are at Columbia. At Columbia, we actually do, and it's something that, we make a conscious effort to work on, not that other cancer centers don't, but to really make sure that we do have diverse participation, and our numbers are, I believe it's up to 40% minority in participation in our clinical trials. But there's always room for improvement and continued growth. But I don't have the information how it compares. I just do know, I know there's been a really big focus on it. Not just Columbia, honestly, the whole kind of clinical trial industry is really doing what they can to try and bridge that gap. But I think everyone recognizes that there's a lot of barriers on different levels. There's from the community, the patient, physicians, systemic, that there's so many different things. So it's just really working to identify what the barriers are and break those down to make sure that people really do have equal access and opportunity. And if there are barriers in place, that we are addressing them and making sure we can make things as easy and smooth as possible.
Steve, one more. It's always one more. You know that, right? It's always one more. He's so tired of us. He's so tired of us with that. I know he is.
Well,
Brett?
before you ask the last question, there were two more.
Okay. Oh, no. Okay. Right. So in terms of, you were talking about trying to get, more people invested and interested in doing this. But in terms of, I'm thinking about class gaps in terms of people that might volunteer to do this, because what I know, like I know I had people outreach to me from you all just to ask me to participate. I'm like, yeah, sure, depending on what it is. But there's a lot of steps, there are a lot of different things you need to do. And I'm wondering, in terms of how do we bridge the class gap? Because I'm assuming, and this is just an assumption, that a lot of people that are participating in this are probably more socioeconomically advantaged, probably more educated. And how do we overcome, the concern for me is how to overcome those barriers so that, people of different, classes, socioeconomic levels are represented in this as well. Because I see a lot of these problems as being linked to some of that, as, some of health issues being linked to some of that and socioeconomic status of people. So I think it's important that they're represented. Have you found that, and how, do you try to overcome that?
Yeah, I mean that it's beyond us. I think it's something that everyone is working on, but something that we really do recognize as an issue, because you're right. So clinical trials, not depending on the study, but some of them can require more time spent at the medical center than a regular treatment would. So more time, depending on an individual situation, that could mean more time away from work. And depending on how someone's paid, if you're paid by the hour versus salary, that's money out of your pocket. If you have to make arrangements for child's care, trust me, these are things that we recognize. And I wish I had the answer to all of it. Know that we recognize it, really are trying to address these things. Clinical trials, again, I speak for our office. Most of them do offer a stipend that's meant to reimburse for things like transportation and parking, and it's doesn't fix everything. It's something, but yeah. And then in terms of just education and health literacy and some of the other things that you mentioned, that's really why we're just trying to get out there and share information with people, so that people know that, what clinical trials are, and that they are an option, and that, we will do what we can to make things as accessible as possible and as easy as possible. And, sometimes that means we have to kind of rearrange clinic visits a little bit and, do things like that to accommodate someone's schedule. And whatever is within our means to do, we will, we will really try to, to take those steps. So thank you. I completely acknowledge everything you're saying. These are things that, yeah, we know are problems, and we're just kind of chipping away, trying to, to tackle them bit by bit.
Thank you. OC.
Yes. Okay, so you're probably aware that not too many years ago, studies, or generally speaking in the pharmaceutical, were done on men only. And one of the things that came out is that women were not the beneficiary in terms of treatments because the study weren't done on women.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, what's the ratio between, are you trying to have the study done equally between like 50% men, 50% women? And I'm not just talking about things that, like, breast cancer is majority of it women issue.
Right.
Not only, but the majority. I'm talking about generally speaking. It's something that I'm not really sure to what extent the industry changed if you now pay attention more to that issue in general. So tell me what's the ratio between men and women, and tell us
Yeah,
more about that.
so I don't have the exact numbers
Mhm.
for you, but you're 100% right. You know, there for a long time it was white men that these were participating in these studies. There is definitely, from what I can tell, it seems like men and women pretty even now. Again, as you mentioned, of course, some studies will skew one way, you know, versus another, just given the nature of the disease. But that just purely anecdotally, based on the things that I've seen, I've been working in clinical trials for a little over 5 years now. Between men and women, it seems to be pretty even. Again, just based on my own observations.
Okay, that's good to know.
All right, thank you. All
Oh,
right,
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
all right, so, was this the same, presentation that Suzanne sent me, last week?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, so I can just refer to what she already sent to me. All right, very good. All right, so if there are no other questions, we'll move on. Thank you, Brianne and Jessica. And certainly feel free to stay in touch with us. And hopefully maybe one of our committee members will be able to attend the forum on the 18th. That would be good if we could get somebody to go.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'd love to see you there.
okay, very good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I don't believe our liaison from the City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is here. I do have, if I can find it, I do have the latest statistics that I called from the DOH website on COVID-19 today. The positivity rate for the week ending May the 1st, which was Monday. All in all, the positivity rates in our 4 zip codes were pretty low. In zip code 32 at 0.72%, 2 new cases. Zip code 33, 1.79%, 4 new cases. Zip code 40 was at 2.42%, slightly above the citywide average, 5 new cases. Zip code 34, 1.3%, and 2 new cases. So in the week ending Monday, there were 13 new cases in our community, which pretty low, certainly compared to some other periods during this pandemic. There have been over 67,000 cases in our district since the beginning of the pandemic. 1,007 people who have passed away. That's the same number as I reported at the general board meeting a week or so ago. So at least no new deaths in the last since then. The vaccination rates are still holding pretty steady. Zip code 34 is just at the edge, just under 80%. The other 3 for people who have received at least 1 dose, 80. The other 3 zip codes are all over 80%. Zip code 32 is at 84.64%. In terms of completing the series of required vaccines, or presumably the minimum, what's called the primary series, all 4 zip codes are over 70%, between 72 and 75. And for residents who have had the bivalent doses, all 4 zip codes are somewhere in the 13 to 14% range. So, we're still running significantly below the citywide and Manhattan rates for people who are getting vaccinated and who have received at least the first dose and the primary series.
Steve, do you have any information about the new variant?
No, I don't.
Okay.
So next speaker on our agenda would have been Sandra Harris from Columbia University Medical Center. I don't believe she's joined us. So next is Julio Batista, the Government and Community Affairs Liaison from New York Presbyterian.
Hi, Steve. Hi, committee members. So as of last week, the number for Friday, I guess ending Friday, April 28th, we had a total of 77 cases of COVID-19 hospital-wide. For our particular area, we had 1 patient at the Allen, 22 patients at Columbia, 6 patients at the Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital. And as of yesterday, we had less than 70 people system-wide. So it dropped, from Friday to yesterday.
Well, I'm sorry, when you say hospital-wide, how many different hospitals?
There'll be 10 campuses.
10, okay. And then that includes Brooklyn, Queens, Westchester.
Correct. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But Steve, I think it's important to know, of those 70 or so cases, how many of them are in our district?
Yeah, well, he gave that report. He said that 1 is at the Allen Hospital, 22 are at Columbia at 168th Street, and 6 are at the Children's Hospital at 165th.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So of the 77, to 29. So what is that? Over a third were in Washington Heights and Inwood.
Right. So, I know, again, this committee is, over the past few years has remained very vigilant and concerned about the Island psychiatric beds. I know that this will continue to linger until there's a final resolution. I'd like to just say that our staff continues ongoing conversation with the New York State Department of Health and the Office of Mental Health on the restorations of those beds. Those conversations are ongoing and are working with the state to identify the best types of beds and services for the community. But we also take into consideration that, the state is taking into consideration the fact that there is, staffing capacity issues, which is not just to NYP, but to many hospitals in the city and the state. So, as when we get some concrete information about a final resolution on those beds, hopefully soon, this committee, of course, will be the first to know, because this committee has been really the one in the forefront of pursuing a resolution to those beds. So when that happens, I'll make sure that this committee is aware when that happens. I also want to report that as a result of the community health needs assessment that was made, New York Presbyterian will be launching, and not hopefully by next week, we will be launching a community health grant, fund grant, which will allocate $300,000 in over a period of 3 years to local organizations that will help address the social determinants of health needs in the community. There will be an RFP process. We will have a website up. They'll have all the details and information about groups that that could apply. What are those targeted indicators that we're hoping to tackle and address? This community health grant will be in addition to the medical center neighborhood fund grants that we do, in addition to the chalk mini grants that we also run through through our chalk program. So more of that to come. Hopefully, once we have details and a website that will have the information on applying for these large grants, we will share that with the committee.
All right, so what you said is that there'll be an RFP posted on the website that groups can apply.
So the idea is that we will develop a page within the website that will have information about these larger grants. We'll have information about capacity building, because part of it also is helping organizations really, and this is something that chalk program does, is really also provide technical assistance to groups that may be starting or that need support in terms of development. So the page will have all this information and how to also access it.
But this will, as you said, this will be targeted to a specific needs or that might create conditions that lead to health problems.
Right, that will lead to social determinants of health is what it is. Yeah,
That's the phrase. Social determinants of health needs.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me just ask. I guess a question for the record is: in these discussions with the state about the restoration of the psych beds, is the hospital still committed to having these beds in Washington Heights and Inwood?
Yes, that is one of the things. Yes.
And the hospital is not able to give us a clear idea as to where these beds might be located?
That is part of the discussion, Steve. And once that is cleared up, we will share that information.
Okay.
I mean, but clearly that it's, as you mentioned in the past, it's two locations. Either it's at Columbia or it's going back to the Allen.
Yeah, well, it doesn't appear to be going back to the Allen. So I have to assume it's going to be someplace down at the main campus around 168th Street.
That could be.
Yeah. And is the hospital requesting money from the state in order to make whatever renovations might be required at the Columbia campus?
I don't know that, I'm not sure if the state, there may be some funding for capital, which, may be part of the process of, hospitals applying for it. But I'm not sure, and I can't speak of whether, that is part of those discussions. But, as I understand, with the budget that was adopted, there are monies for capital that the hospitals can apply for.
All right. I may lose my connection in a few minutes, but I would be able to come back in case I get interrupted. But I have three of my committee members with questions. Actually, I have one. Well, actually, I'll wait to see if Tanya asks the question that I have in mind. And if she doesn't, I'm going to ask it. So OC, you go first. OC, are you still with us?
He's out of screen at the moment, so you may want to go.
All right, well, let's move on to Tanya.
Yes, Julio, this is regards to the beds. I know this wasn't in our community, so, but what happened with Jordan Neely, the person who was experiencing mental health crisis on the train and got choked out and killed, and I'd say murdered by a passenger on the train. And I say this because of the need for us to do as much as we can to service people who need mental health treatment, especially inpatient. Because we can't have these kind of things happening where, passengers and people being vigilantes, or I'm going to choke you out, I'm going to take you down because I feel threatened by you. And someone loses their life because they're experiencing mental, no one should die because they're experiencing a mental health crisis, and especially not die at the hands of another person, riding a train.
Yeah.
So, and there's no justice in that, but that's a whole nother issue. But that person just got away with murder. But so this is really, really important that we are able to service the community and provide the service they need, because it's clear that this decentralization, this outpatient stuff is not enough, and it's not servicing folks, and there is a need for inpatient treatment to stabilize people who may need it. And so, yeah, I just say that just to, continue to express, from us, why this is really, really important. And I just want you to take that back, that's all.
I wholeheartedly understand, Tanya, and but I also think it's, the issue of mental health is not something that, we as a hospital institution can really, solve. And I think that that's why it's so important that some of the efforts that Dr. Warren Ning is doing, working with folks like Charlie Corliss in the community, and being a part of the leadership of what we call the mental health subcommittee of the Northern Manhattan agenda, where you bring in together all these different community players who are working around the issue of mental health, and creating a collaborative that would hopefully deal with some of these issues. And the benefit of that has been, we talked about staffing. One of the issues that comes up a lot is really, trying to find psychiatrists or bilingual psychiatrists, or, that you can tap into, that you can certainly hire. And that has been one of those positive outcomes, really, of this collaborative, and the work that Dr. is doing is bringing in the resources to help identify, folks that you can perhaps hire to do some of this work that's so important. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
All right. Well, Tanya did have another question, but she forgot to ask it. She wanted to know what is the status of the building that was planned for the block front on Broadway between 169th and 170th Street.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for reminding.
That's a great question, Steve. As you know, that building was slated for some community use and other uses for the hospital. Right after COVID hit, things really just tapered off. I mean, it was placed, everything was on hold. There are discussions now taking place around, the usage of that particular space, what to do with it. Because of, obviously, we know that a vacant building and no usage, no activities really lead to other things. So there is, sort of discussions around, what we need to do with this building. And hopefully, I'm hopeful that probably within the next 2 months, we will get some sort of answer in terms of that. In the meantime, I know that some of the issues have come up again because the place has been vacant, is the cleanliness and security wise of this. Happy to say that the hospital has partnered with the Washington Heights Business Improvement District, which has a component of beautification, cleaning, graffiti removal. And so we've entered into a contract with the bid to expand those services all along Broadway, south to 167th Street, so that, again, the whole Broadway corridor is maintained. But in terms of the building itself and what will be done with it, long term, hopefully we'll know that within the next coming few months.
So the previous concept as to how it's to be utilized for apartments for employees or staff, as a sort of hotel for patients' families, as a early childhood hub for retail
Yeah, so sorry, I think we lost Steve for a minute. So, just recanting what Steve said, the idea for that particular parcel land was really, first floor would be retail. Second floor, we will have what we call an early childhood hub, which is a component of, 0 to 3 or 5-year-olds, working with the different daycare centers, so they can have a space, a safe space to come in. There will be opportunity that if they are there's food insecurity, there'll be food available for them that they could take back at no cost. There will be, working with other CBOs if they need, clothing, whatever it be, that they can also secure that. So this is a space that will be solely dedicated to that population. And then there will be a series of apartments. Basically, it's 1 bedrooms and studio for hospital staff. And then the other portion will be what we call guest accommodation, was about 90 rooms. So for families, patients that needed to stay in the community, instead of going downtown or whatever it may be, they could, stay overnight for a short stay at this location. So all of that right now we're not sure where it is. The hospital is extremely committed to the early childhood hub because it's something that's needed by our families, and we're still looking at a space somewhere within the community that we could still house that.
I know Steve is not here, but yeah, I think he was curious about whether this was still the plan for the site. And I think that was the question he was leading up to. Yeah, because I have concerns about that too, because I think how this was sold to the community of displacing all those businesses was this early childhood, component, that there would be some benefit to the people in this community, because the other components didn't have really much of that. And so I think that was the concern, is that, all these businesses were kicked out, and so I would be curious in terms of what's changed, because, I'd be concerned if it's a totally different plan now that all those businesses got displaced. But anyway, I'll wait. Steve is the chair, so I was just expressing my thoughts. I don't want to hijack anything. I was just saying that.
Is it now a vacant lot that there's nothing in it? For how many years it's like that?
Well, it's the request.
Point of order. Who is chairing the meeting while Steve is out?
Tanya, right?
He's back. No, I'm not. Steve is back.
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry about that. My computer just zones out. I don't get this. So I was in the middle of saying that the previous concept for that building along Broadway was it was going to feature apartments for staff. It was going to be something of a hotel for patients' families. It was going to provide something called an early childhood hub. It would have some retail stores. So is that mix now being re-envisioned, or it's being reconsidered, I guess?
I believe it's going to be reconsidered because things have changed slightly. I mean, I was mentioning that the early childhood hub is something that we continue to be very interested in, and as a matter of fact, looking at possible space so that we can provide that support for that collaborative as soon as possible, so that but the early childhood hub is happening. I'm not sure it's going to happen there, but we will make sure that it's up and running as soon as possible.
All right, so it just may not be in that building. Probably won't be, from what I gather.
Steve, how many years this building is vacant or demolished? I don't remember.
Hasn't been demolished. It's been vacant for 4 years now.
It's a block.
Block.
It's an entire block.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about, but
Actually, there's a small apartment building on 169th Street off of Broadway that's been vacant far longer than that, maybe up to 10 years or so. Quite a while.
that's not reason to make that okay.
Oh, I'm far from me to suggest that it's okay.
Mhm.
It looks as though, it looks as though 20 or so families might have still had a
Yeah, it
place.
was a 13 unit, it's a 13 unit railroad apartment complex, yeah, 13 units.
All right. But I'm correct, am I not, that it's been vacant for at least 10 years?
I would, yeah, that sounds about accurate because it was vacant prior to the commercial tenants vacant leaving. So I guess the commercial tenants are out for about 4 years now. And so, yeah, that sounds about accurate.
All right, well, so obviously, there's a general interest in the community, obviously, in seeing something done sooner rather than later with that block so that it doesn't remain a blight in the middle of the community on a major commercial street.
Yeah.
All
And just to say, and just also add, I know that, maybe the thoughts of some folks here, and probably I'm surprised Steve has not mentioned, is a Coogan space. There are talks and attempts to try to bring back a restaurateur that will be able to, manage the space and bring a restaurant to that location.
Well, that would make me happy. So as well as I'm sure many other people in the community. So it's
Wasn't there a supermarket before?
there was one block to the north at 170th Street. There was a Gristedes.
Right.
And the hospital was talking about bringing back a supermarket of some type at that location.
Mhm.
So I would assume that would still be under consideration.
Mhm.
But bringing back another restaurant at the Coogan site, I think would be welcomed by many people in the community.
Yeah, all right, because I know there was to my understanding, there was, I'm not sure what was the restaurant in Harlem that they had discussed with and it didn't work out. I'm not sure the reasons, but there is interest in bringing back a restaurant there.
So there are active discussions going on within the
Yeah.
hospital with your real estate people. They're actively searching for somebody.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's welcome news because certainly every time I walk past Coogan's, my heart drops when I see how it's still gated and that there's nothing in there,
Mhm.
and that we lost a major asset to this community, and I don't know that we could ever replace it, but as it was, it was such a great place to go. But at least something should be there. We should
Yeah.
bring some kind of restaurant back to that corner. Jay Mazer, you have a question or a comment?
Both. I have some personal information on the former psych unit of Allen, because when I was hospitalized the last week of February with COVID, I was hospitalized in Allen in the former psych unit.
Mhm.
I was the only COVID patient there, and it wasn't overly occupied by other patients, was my experience. That doesn't indicate, by the way, that the care I received was in any way, shape, or form adequate. But leaving that aside, I don't think that particular part of Allen was overly used at this time. Now, as to the vacant building where the construction might occur in the future, which would be a good thing, and the facility for relatives of patients, which is actually needed in the neighborhood, although it might be a hotel, can't be called a hotel because that block is not zoned to allow for hotel construction, is my understanding. However, an area which is going to be having food service, valet service, and so on, is in any way, shape, or form a hotel, and it's obviously needed. As to my recollection of the original discussion of the use of that facility, the community benefit was described as having a professor of psychology do a study on the development of the brains of children under 8 years of age in the neighborhood. And I didn't quite understand how that was a community benefit of any sort. So I presume discussions have advanced since then on that subject. And I'm really kind of unaware of where they're at now. I thought maybe Julio could enlighten us on both those questions. The questions I raised about the Allen Hospital and the questions about the building reconstructed, or actually more importantly, the youth services to be provided. Now, in addition to that, I'd like to make a point of order for the committee. That is, generally in Robert's Rules of Order, people who have not spoken are supposed to be called on before people who have already been had the opportunity to speak. And that obviously isn't the way we prescribe this time, although I do think all the points raised by the people who spoke before me in asking you questions are extremely valid.
Well, I guess I have to check Robert's rules because I've simply been calling people as their hands appear on the screen. Normally in each round, I would call upon people who, before I call people a second time, I would call people who haven't yet spoken. But
in any event, I'd like Julio to discuss questions about Allen and the proposed new building, and like I said, more importantly, the proposed youth services insofar as he can at this point.
Okay, well, good. Let's give them a chance to speak.
Yeah, so Jay, I'm so sorry you were hospitalized. I hope you're okay now. So the psychiatric beds were converted as the governor mandated to accommodate the surge of possible COVID patients at the height of the pandemic. After that, it's been used for acute patients. I couldn't tell you how many patients. I think it accommodated 28 in total, or less than that. I couldn't tell you right now the usage around the time that you were there in February. Obviously, it was a time where we were hopeful that the numbers were dropping, and we did not have that many COVID patients up at the Allen. I could certainly find out in terms of what sort of usage has been, number of patients we've gotten to that have been taken to that particular unit. In terms of the development project, this is a site where we're not asking for any sort of waiver. This will not be a ULURP process for this particular location. On 169th Street, we talked about community benefit. We never really addressed it as a community benefit. We talked about having a early childhood hub located within this building because we're forming a collaborative with all the different childcare centers and be able to provide really care and services to, 0 to 5-year-olds when, really they start developing their brains and, and it's an important time for the development. There that I recall, this is the first I've heard of that there was some sort of brain study taking place, but that was never the case for this particular project. There may have been something maybe with, maybe confused with something maybe the university was working on, because they do research. We really don't do research. The only, in terms of community benefits was really the early childhood hub that would have occupied the second floor of the proposed building back in 2018, I think, or 2019.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
I was at the meeting, as were you.
Mhm.
And my recollection is the professor who was interested in young brains was going to work out of the second floor. And there was also someone there from the Eleanor Roosevelt Institute who thought this was all a wonderful thing, but I didn't quite understand what it had to do with Eleanor Roosevelt. And I still think the project of the 90 beds to serve people who are visiting or attempting to give care or comfort to people staying in the hospital is an excellent idea.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it should proceed, but I do want to point out again, the only reason not to call it a hotel is because the block is not zoned to build a hotel upon.
Yeah,
I also think the residential facility for people studying there is also an excellent idea.
Well, my understanding, it wouldn't be for people studying at the medical center. It would be for employees of the hospital.
Well, the way it's built, my first, the concept that we had about what we call accommodations suites, is really modeled after what we have down at Weill Cornell. At Weill Cornell, we have what we call the Hemsley Tower, which is a mixed-use building where it allows families, patients to stay overnight if they have an appointment or they visiting family, or visiting someone at the hospital, they could stay. So we don't call it a hotel. We call it really guest accommodations. But we don't really call a hotel. Now, the space where we talked about housing is really for hospital, and I believe also, Steve, it did include extended to Columbia as well. So just the hospital staff. I think it's really for those who worked on campus. And some may, I know that some people objected to that, but my point of view, and as a member of this community, is that I prefer to have a hospital person or some university come and rent an apartment that's, that's for the hospital or the university, and not an apartment in a residential, in a purely residential building where you come in, you take a lease out, and in 1 or 2 years you're leaving, and then that apartment that you just left now gets the vacancy, and it gets a higher increase every year. So I tend to think that having an opportunity to people to move into an institutional space is much better for the community than having them rent an apartment in a private building.
Actually, Julio, I agree with you, but not for the exact reason you gave, because at this point, I don't think we have any, we don't have the vacancy allowance anymore, but still it provides for a more stable residential population in our buildings when you have people who are staying for more than just a couple of years at a time. So what you said earlier then is that those units would have also been available to the Columbia students or Columbia employees?
Yeah, my understanding it was anyone who worked at the campus,
All right, so-
which would entail also Columbia University.
Okay, so either employees of either Columbia or the hospital.
Right.
I would just hope that as the building is being reconceptualized, that it's not going to be any taller than the 13 stories. I suspect one of the reasons it's being looked at is because of the economics, and maybe you don't have as much money available at the moment as you might have had a few years ago. So maybe the building will actually end up being smaller and more contextual with the rest of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Sorry, where is the building, Steve? I'm lost. You're talking about the vacant lot? No.
No, it's not vacant, OC. It's the building is still there.
The stores are vacant, but the building is still standing
Where is it?
between 169th and 170th Street on the west side of Broadway.
Okay.
All right. I don't see any other questions for Julio. And thank you. And hopefully next month, Julio, you'll have some news for us on some of these issues that are still hanging out there. Thank you. Next, Diane Ashley.
Thanks.
I'm sorry we've kept you waiting this long. And I appreciate the fact that you stick it out with us month after month. So Diane, what news do you have from Isabella?
Not a lot has changed. We have 2 residents who are positive for COVID on state mandated temporary isolation. Our stats around vaccination remain pretty constant. 91% have received the primary series, 74% at least 1 booster, and 50% have received the bivalent vaccine and are up to date.
Okay, so 91% have received the primary series.
Yes. 74% have at least 1 booster.
And what was the last one?
50% have received bivalent and are characterized as up to date.
Oh, that's amazing.
I think that contrasts with 13 or 14% in terms of what you reported.
Yes, for in the general community, absolutely, yes.
And then just as reported last time, per DOH guidelines, visitors and staff are no longer required to test prior to entry. We do encourage people to, but we're no longer allowed to require. And we do continue to follow guidelines for regular passive screening, signage, facial coverings, etc.
That you do require facial coverings?
Well, for the DOH guidelines, Isabella continues to conduct passive screenings and protocols, include signage throughout the facility, infection control precautions, use of face coverings, and applicable facility practices. So it's the same. It hasn't changed since last month, or I believe the month before. It really, the only thing that has changed is that we are no longer allowed to require testing.
All right. Do me a favor. Just send me that last sentence about the facial coverings and signage and the other thing. All right. Are there Jay? Is that a question for Diane? Jay? All right. Let's move on to old business.
I think he's trying to unmute Steve.
Oh, Jay, you have Jay?
Yes,
You have a question? Jay? Jay,
oh gosh,
did you have a question?
yes.
Go ahead.
My question,
Go ahead. You keep going back and forth between being muted and unmuted.
Don't press any more buttons, Jay.
Yeah, Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
My question for Diane, and this is really a simple question, but I don't know if the information is available. In the early days of the pandemic, 3 employees of Isabella died of COVID. I was just wondering, since that spring of 2020, have there been any more employee deaths from COVID?
Since spring of 2020, I don't know the answer.
My question was since then.
Right. I don't know the answer. I'm not aware of any, but I don't know that answer.
Oh, could you find out for
I can
us
try
by
and find
next
out.
month?
Sure, I can try and find out.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Okay. All right, on to old business. I sent around the latest monthly report from DEP on complaints generated or requests generated for service from our district for the month of April. Once again, noise, construction before and after hours. It was the leading complaint, 47. Complaints about odor and fumes and from idling vehicles, 30 complaints. Noise from alarms, 18 complaints. And we're already getting hydrants running. There were 15 complaints in April. On the street and sidewalk cleanliness ratings for March, the month of March, our street cleanliness ratings were considered 98% acceptable. Interestingly enough, I didn't see these results or these ratings earlier, but for the month of February, our ratings were relatively low at about 75%. And in, I think in the southernmost sector, they were down at 65%. So they went from, in 1 month from February to March, they went from 75 to 75.4% to 98%. On the ratings for sidewalks in the month of March, we were at 100%, and in February we were all the way down at 99.1%. There were no updated recycling statistics that were posted by the sanitation department. I also sent around to the committee members the reports from DDC on the work they're doing in our community, much of which apparently involves Con Edison utility lines. There were 2 separate reports that I believe I sent to people in the last couple of days.
Can I ask you something, Steve?
1 second, Jay, is that a new hand? Jay? Okay, Julio?
Yes, I was going to ask you, in terms of the reports that they issue in terms of cleanliness, do they give you a specific, more or less a general area of where the, you know, the locations are?
Well, they break it down into 4 different sectors in Washington Heights and Inwood. And that's as we have a map that I can share with you, but that's as specific as it gets.
All right, because there are, you know, different groups are doing different cleanups. You know, like Cloth is doing some cleanups, and it would be nice to see the map and see whether those are areas that they should be targeting, and groups should be targeting that instead of just doing something in general.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. But most of except for that month of February where we really seem to have declined, the ratings are usually pretty even throughout the 4 districts. But yeah, that might be something that different groups should take a look at.
It'd be good because, summer happens to be a time when people are all out and they're gonna be throwing stuff all over the place. So it'll be good to know.
Uh,
Steve, do you want to give update about the textile recycling?
um,
That there is no update?
oh, yes, that's the update. Yes, there is no
Yeah.
update.
There is no update. And it's not clear when we will have an update.
Right, yeah, that's also part of the update. Yes.
Right, nothing is clear.
Yeah, and we have no place to bring our old clothes.
We do, but it's in the Bronx.
That's in the, well, I'm not, but did you tell me that the drop-off site at Columbia that it's not open or something?
They're not always there. 120, I'm sorry, it's 116 and
Maybe
Broadway and 116th Street.
114th, 115th, yeah.
Right, they're not always there.
Right.
In terms of batteries, my understanding because of the sanitation trucks, they had like, I think 16 of them since the beginning of the year that went on fire because of those rechargeable bike batteries. And so the sanitation department is looking into a new program, potentially events or drop-off locations. And so it will be extremely helpful to have them here to tell us exactly what they're planning. And maybe we will be the first district to be like a pilot program district, or have what they're thinking here first. So we are first on something other than crime. So can we invite the sanitation to talk to us about that?
I think I sent them an email after I got your suggestion. Let me check back on that. So yeah, what you're saying is that you believe they're going to create drop-off sites for the lithium-ion batteries?
Right, or events. It's not really clear exactly what they're going to do, but if they want to do events in the farmers markets, that will be welcome.
Okay, well, let me check with them again.
Okay. And also in terms of recycling, we don't have an ongoing place to drop off recycling. Like, I'm sorry, e-waste recycling, I meant.
Well, actually, we should give a report about the e-waste. I don't have the numbers handy, but apparently the e-waste that we urged the Lower East Side Ecology Center to do up at Inwood Hill Park and Isham and Seaman was fantastically successful. I forget the numbers, but it was.
I have the email in front of me. It was well intended with 165 participating households dropping off 2,954 pounds of unwanted electronics. Now, I don't know what is it in relation to other districts? I mean, it's wonderful that it's great, but it's great in relation to who? Like, what other district are dropping off? We have to compare it to know if we're doing that well, that's wonderful. But if we are just doing okay, we need to know how other districts are doing.
Well, the woman who sent that email is the head of the Lower East Side Ecology Center, which sponsors these e-waste collection events all over the city. So I have to, if she's telling us that this was a very successful event, she has to be basing it on her experience doing this all over the place. So
okay, so
it was 165 households and 2,954 pounds of unwanted
electronics.
Very good. Okay, is there any new business?
I don't know. When is the next e-waste event?
I don't know. I wrote to her to find out. I didn't get a response.
Because I know that Sally was planning one at the Dykeman houses.
We we didn't quite pull it off this time, but
Right.
hopefully we can do it next time.
Okay. And hopefully the next time is really, really, really soon.
Well, I was pushing to have it very soon too. Yes. Well, I'm putting your item about the lithium ion batteries. I'm putting that under new business. Jay, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Based on my 5 days staying at Allen Pavilion, I was wondering, which I thought was disastrous, but I was wondering if we could get a report from Julio on the condition of residential patients at Allen, which is degrees, not as many degrees worse than the patient care in the main Presbyterian campus. Actually, unbelievably so. And I mean, my one experience doesn't explain too much. I thought the hospital might have a more worked out understanding of what's going on there than my 5 days of unpleasant stay there would have. And they could share that with us, and we'd get a clearer idea of the status of inpatient care at Allen, which is in our neighborhood community district as well as Presbyterian. And I think it is an important question.
It probably is an important question, but I don't know that I would rely upon the hospital to tell me how the care at Allen may differ from the care at 168th Street. I'm not sure who would. There must be some independent authority that maybe evaluates the level of care, but I don't know that this is a question. I mean, I think I could already predict the answer from the hospital, so I don't know that it's worth asking them.
I mean, I do think the question is worth pursuing. I was actually shocked. I mean, simple things like sweeping the floors weren't done during my stay there.
Well, I think it might be helpful if you would either do a letter or some kind of a memo, documenting or listing these conditions, and we then ask the hospital what they may be doing to try to improve them or to address them, rather than just throw out a general question to them. Julio?
Yeah, I would like to see if with Jay's permission, whether I would like to sort of match up someone from patient services to meet up with Jay, so Jay could go over all these problems. Obviously, if he had an unpleasant stay because of various reasons, we want to know what those are and see how this is systemic, and whether in fact what we can do to ensure that all patients are receive the same level of care. Jay mentions this disparity between Columbia and the Allen, where there shouldn't be. So if it's okay with Jay, I would like to be able to connect. I would like to connect them with someone at the Allen that can certainly have a discussion around these concerns.
Oh, I'd be perfectly willing to talk to anyone who's interested in the question. The reason I wanted to involve you in this is I don't think my bad experience necessarily proves anything about general patient care there or not. and my being a COVID patient might have also related to that question.
That could be. However, I think it's important that every single patient that comes in, regardless of whether it's COVID or anything else, receives excellent patient care. And we want to know what those concerns were and make sure that they're addressed.
Oh, I'd appreciate that, actually.
All right, next month, Jay, you'll report back to us on how this was, what the follow-up was on this. All right, are there any announcements?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
We spoke about trauma center like a few times. I don't know if we, well, it will be great to have someone from either Department of Health or another hospital to talk to us about what's involved in opening a trauma center in our district.
Well, I have.
Just to have a conversation, we don't even know what's involved.
Yes, well, let me talk to you offline. I am pursuing this.
And you didn't tell me.
No, there are some things I have not revealed to you. Are there any other announcements? All right, so at our next meeting, June the 1st, we will be getting a presentation from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection on a study they have undertaken utilizing noise cameras to study the noise issue in our community. This was an item. This was a topic suggested to us by none other than Tanya Bonner, the head of the Washington Heights Inwood Task Force on Noise. And so mark your calendars, June the 1st, and we'll see you all then. This meeting is being adjourned at 8:53 p.m. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Marilady Pimentel. I hope you'll be joining us on a more frequent basis.
Yes, thank you to you. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everybody. It's
All
nice to
right,
see you.
good night.
Stay healthy. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
All right, take care. Thank you all.